In 1996, school systems and parents all around the world screamed in complete terror as the game where you throw balls at animals released worldwide and became a cultural phenomenon for many years to come. These games, titled Pokemon Red and Blue for the rest of the world and Pokemon Red and Green for Japan, and later on everyone receiving Pokemon Yellow, would be the start of something truly great, and not so great, for the following decades. And in today's video, I will be covering each generation top to bottom as part of a new series titled the Pokemon Mainline Retrospect, where I go through every single mainline Pokemon game in this series, including remakes, and discuss how good these games truly are. Also, yes, I said mainline games, which means no, I am not covering the anime, TCG spin-offs, etc. Although, I might cover the anime one day, but that will be for a very long time. I am purely talking about the mainline games. Of course, everything you see in here is my own opinion, and nothing should be taken seriously. We're discussing the series with the funny yellow rat as its mascot. Death threats might be a bit too far. Okay, but why am I putting myself through this? Well, Pokemon has essentially been probably the biggest part of my childhood. I love the anime, and still do love it. I was completely obsessed with Pokemon for a pretty good chunk of my life. However, over the past few years, my love for Pokemon has kind of faded out. I still enjoyed the series, but it wasn't really doing it for me. Since 2022, my love for this franchise has regrown immensely though, partly due to the release of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet and Ash Ketchum leaving the anime, which hit kinda hard. But because I was a kid with little money growing up, and some games just weren't re-released much, thanks for that Nintendo, there are a lot of games I just never played. So as a way to make up for this, I want to go back and play every mainline game, and I figured I might as well make content out of it to see how well these games have held up, and if they were ever good in the first place. However, for me, this series is going to be different in terms of review, so I want to treat it as such. Instead of splitting the sections up into things like gameplay, soundtrack, etc., I'm going to split it into a Road to Each Gym kind of thing. For the first section, I'll discuss everything up to Pewter Gym, second I'll discuss everything up to Cerulean Gym, etc. You get how it works, hopefully. And by the way, you've probably already noticed, but for this video and most of the videos in this series, I will have a UI that shows you my team and other stuff. And finally, I played Pokemon Red for this video, so everything here is going off of that version. However, there will be some talk about Blue and Yellow, and a tiny bit about Green, to discuss version differences. And now with that all said and done, let's head on and officially start to talk Pokemon Generation 1. The title screen. The title screen is very simple. Starts off with the iconic animation of Gengar vs Nidorino. Unless you're in Pokemon Blue, which has Gengar vs Jigglypuff, it then leads into a giant logo with your trainer underneath it. If you picked Red, your trainer will have a Charmander. If you picked Blue, your trainer will have a Squirrel. And obviously, since I might as well mention it, picking Green will mean your trainer has Bulbasaur next to it. Pressing Start will play the cry of the Pokemon's first Evo, so like I said, pressing Start on Red will give you Charmander's cry. Again, the main menu is very simple, just a basic box with New Game, Continue, and Settings. Like every Pokemon game, the game starts off with you being told by the professor about the world of Pokemon. It's a pretty standard explanation that you can very simply skip. The professor forgets his own grandson's name because the game needs you to name your rival some way or another, and this is where your journey truly begins. Once you've made your way to Professor Oak's lab, you can pick your starter, and this is the first thing we can talk about. I'm not sure if this was done intentionally, but don't be fooled because it's basically where you pick your difficulty for the first quarter of the game. Let me explain. Charmander is the hard mode. Charmander is weak to the first two gyms. Bulbasaur is the easy mode, being super effective against the first two gyms, and Squirtle is the normal mode, being super effective against the first gym, but not very effective against the second gym due to same typing. So if you're starting this game for the first time and haven't played Pokemon, I recommend Bulbasaur to get used to the mechanics and shit like that. Whether this is intentional or not, I think it's pretty cool and serves as a hidden way for a difficulty system. This is also the first of many Pokemon choices you will have to make that you can't go back on. The others being a choice between which evolution you want, Dome or Helix Fossil, and Hitmonlee or Hitmonchan. Palatown is an alright starting town. Pretty damn small, but that's also pretty much the same for every single region, so I really can't dig Red and Blue for this. I can dig at them for starting the trend though. Route 1 is also rather basic, but it's the first route, and a good first route at that. It's meant to get you started, so again, it's not really something I can bully it for. I also got a Rattata and Pidgey there, who will be massive helps in the game. After you've got your starter, you can pick up a package for Oak, which is a very basic fetch quest that you're never even told to do, by the way, you're just expected to figure it out. If you try to skip this, there'll be an old man who, if you're playing an English copy of the game, is angry because he hasn't had his coffee yet. But if you're playing a Japanese copy though, the man will be passed out drunk. Viridian City is kinda nice. It's cool how they foreshadow the Giovanni gym. There's also a tutorial you can get that is done by the old man once he's had his coffee, but I skipped it because, I already knew what I was doing. The designs of the houses, poker centers, and poker marts are all pretty basic. Poker centers are just squares with the word poke on them, and same for poker marts, except marts have the word mart on them, obviously. Some houses are squares while others are more rectangular, but all have no words on them. Poke centers are obviously places where you can heal your Pokemon, but they also have a box system via the PC. And let it be known that this box system sucks. Unless you have open slots in your party, you cannot change your Pokemon freely. You have to go into deposit, put a Pokemon you want to remove in there, exit that, go into withdraw, and then you can pick a Pokemon. And every time you want to switch to a different box, you need to save. I get that this was the first game and the Game Boy wasn't the strongest thing out there, but I'm sure they could have come up with a system that wasn't so damn tedious and straight up annoying. One of the worst parts about this game, however, is the grinding. At the time of writing this, which, by the way, I should mention I'm writing this script as I progress, so my thoughts can be fresh in my mind, but I'll obviously go back and adjust it later. I'm still in pewter, so this might improve throughout the rest of the game, but so far, grinding's a bitch. You start off this game at level 5, and your rival battle, if you win, levels your starter up to level 6. The Pokemon you find in the wild barely give you enough XP and are only about level 5 or less, so if you plan on getting a Pokemon, be prepared to have to grind even more. Trainer battles are pretty much your best bet, and you only have a limited number of them you can do up to Pewter Gym. So you are going to have to go into the wild and battle Pokemon, and you are going to be there for a while. Especially since Brock's Pokemon are level 12 and 14. And before anyone asks about XP share, well, that doesn't exist in this game. XP share wasn't a thing until Gen 6 with X and Y, so you are forced to one by one level up your Pokemon and make sure they don't get behind. It is a chore. But on the good side, at least I can say this game isn't the easiest thing I've ever played. It's not entirely difficult either, but it's still harder than any battle in Sword and Shield, and I fully mean that. Pewter is an alright town, but I really wish it had more to do with Brock's gym. It's got caves to the side of it, but that's really it. It doesn't really make the gym fit, in my opinion, but it's at least better than some of the gyms we'll see later on. But enough about gameplay, we should take a moment to talk about the characters. There aren't many character moments through to Pewter Gym, but there's still some worth noting, like your rival, who I called Sonic, but for simplicity's sake I'll just call Blue, is a dick. He's one of those characters you just love to hate, and I'm totally down for that in all honesty. Honestly, I do miss the shitty rivals in the new games. I think Oak is also kinda charming, but I wish he did more overall. Same with your mum, who literally just kinda tells you that she expected this, and then tells you to piss off. That's all she says, and whenever you speak to her again, she'll just heal your Pokemon. The actual Brock battle wasn't too difficult, by the way. Again, picking Bulbasaur gave me a much easier time, but I feel terrible for anyone who genuinely picked Charmander. Heading on from Brock, the road to Misty is fairly short, and mainly just has you battle through a cave. However, there is some stuff I want to talk about that I found interesting while exploring. Let's talk about the cave system first. So the cave you go through is fairly short, and I like the idea of it a lot. It requires thought to make your way through, and sometimes you can just stumble across a new thing. But you wanna know what makes me fucking despise it? The fact that every 5 seconds there's a Pokemon encounter. And yeah, I could use repels, but money is annoying to get in this game, at least in the early game, and you've got to be very careful with it compared to later entries in the series like Scarlet and Violet, where money is the easiest thing in the world. Also, the fact it's hard to tell where you're going because of the small screen and lack of colour depending on what you play on, but this isn't really a flaw of the game and more due to the console they made it for, which was the Game Boy. The leveling system in this game is also kinda confusing. Like, maybe I'm just stupid, but I really don't get how it works. It just feels really slow. Misty's Pokemon are level 18 and 21, but by the time I got to Cerulean, 3/4 of my Pokemon were under level 15. Yes, I know I meant to grind and shit, but I don't feel invested in doing that because from what I played, grinding is just not fun. I've already talked about this in the Brock section, so I won't go over it again, but like I said, it's not fun. However, I did feel it got a little easier after Brock, or at least more enjoyable, mainly because there were way more battles involved and a lot more area in between Cerulean and Pewter than there was between Pewter and Pallet Town. Also, the sprite work in this game is really funny. Like, they wanted to go for realistic designs, which is kind of cool. I like them leaning into the supernatural side. But it does look kind of stupid. Squirtle has the best sprite, by the way, and that's why he's the best starter. Look at him. He's just so silly. Oh yeah, I also almost completely forgot to talk about the Team Rocket moments. There's nothing from Blue or Oak in this part of the game, but there's a couple Team Rocket moments. For example, they're the reason the cave is so closely guarded. You can get a couple items in the cave, and each item is guarded by a Team Rocket grunt you have to take out if you want the item. It seems they're trying to get fossils, but I stopped them and steal a fossil instead. You can pick between the Helix fossil or the Dome fossil. Also, once you get to Cerulean, there's an interaction you can have with Officer Jenny that reveals someone was robbed by Team Rocket, and that the police force has trouble with them. Overall, the gym battle with Misty wasn't as difficult as I was expecting it to be. My Bulbasaur evolved on the way to the gym, so Ivysaur basically carried the gym, despite the level difference. I grabbed the gym badge, which made me be able to capture and train Pokemon up to level 30, and I can cut things now. Also, since I didn't get a chance to mention the team in full, the current team is Ivysaur, Pidgey, Rattata, and an Ekans I caught in Route 4. Okay, well, starting off, Blue is back. He makes fun of us for struggling and then challenges to a fight. His battle is kind of easy. I did have a bit of trouble with his Pidgeotto, but it wasn't too bad. Also, somehow Blue still has a level 17 Charmander. Why didn't he evolve it? Is he stupid? Anyways, after we kicked his ass, he tells us of Bill, a world-famous Pokemaniac who showed Blue a bunch of rare Pokemon, and also invaded the Pokemon storage system. First is Nugget Bridge though, which actually wasn't too bad. At the end we get a Nugget and ask if we want to join Team Rocket. I'm not even allowed to say yes, and I'm forced to fight this random-ass guy for a choice I can't even make. Like, I would very much like to join Team Rocket, please. Let's stop fighting. We have the same goals. Also, a quick side note, but these past few fights made me realize how much of a help Leech Seed is, especially in a game where heals like potions are very limited. So speaking of potions being limited, I say let's play God and change that. Okay, but I really should be honest here, and before I do, I know people are going to be annoyed or whatever, but just hear me out. I eventually got tired of grinding and having to go back to the Poké Center every 2 fights so I could heal. I did indeed hack in a bunch of rare candies and potions, but I'm not going to abuse these. I just did it to make the game feel like less of a slog. I'm only going to use the rare candies when I feel underleveled, which is mainly when I get to a town. I'm not going to go higher than the gym leader's Pokemon either. I also gave myself a Pikachu, because, well, there's no reason for that, I just like Pikachu. And before anyone is like, oh, well, now you've made it piss easy, well, no, because I didn't take into account Ethers, or really any way of restoring PP, nor did I take into account Revives. So if I start running out of moves or Pokemon ties, I've got to make a trip back to the Poké Center, obviously. But now back to complaining. So it turns out spamming A is not a good thing when you're trying to learn a new move. Usually in Pokemon games, when a Pokemon learns a move, you can choose whether you want to forget an old move or ignore the new move. This is still a thing here, except if you're like me and you spam and then expect there to be a confirmation screen when you pick a move, you'll be surprised to learn, no, that isn't a thing. You get one shot, and if you misclick, shame on you. It should also be mentioned that you can't see what the move does in picking it, unlike newer games. So you kind of just have to guess and hope you pick the right move, and if not, skill issue, I guess. Anyways, we make it to Bill's. We find out he completely fucked up an experiment and turned himself into a Pokemon. We help him out and he gives us a ticket to the SSN. I also do like the detail that once you help Bill, the Pokemon storage system in the PC changes from someone's PC to Bill's PC. It's not much, but it is a nice detail. We head back to Cerulean and Officer Jenny is now standing aside the door to the robbed house, meaning we can enter freely now. We fought off the Team Rocket grunt and got the TM for Dig. Other than the stuff you have to do in Cerulean, the path to getting to Vermilion is actually pretty short. You can come across the thirsty guards that won't let you pass without a drink, but we don't have to worry about those yet. We get to the SSN and eventually run into our rival, Sonic the Hedgehog. He brags about having found 40 kinds of Pokemon, which, like, how the fuck did you do that? I've only found 10 so far. How in the world have you got 4 times that? He challenges to a battle, which starts off with Pidgeotto, which is fine, but... And I know this gets brought up all the time, but I gotta talk about it. How in the world did my trader in Kanto get a level 16 Eradicate? Before he had a Rattata, which doesn't evolve until level 20, his is level 16. And you could say he caught one, but in this game you can only catch one at Route 16, 17, 18, and 21. We are not even close to there yet. I thought I was the only one hacking, but nope, apparently Blue can too. After that whole debacle, we find the captain, and he's very much throwing up. We rub his back, which just makes him better somehow, and he gives the HM for cut. We leave the SSN, and I do want to point out, I think it's kind of cool that there is actually a sprite for the SSN, and we also get to see it leave, instead of it just disappearing out of thin air once we exit. Anyways, since we now have cut, we're able to take on Lieutenant Surge. Before that though, I forgot to mention that when you get to Vermilion, go to the house to the top left of the gym, speak to the old man with the top hat, and choose to listen to him talk about his Pokemon. I'm not sure if he talks about any other Pokemon, but for me he talks about Rapidash. After that he'll give you a bike voucher, meaning we could now get a bike. Sorry, I just thought that'd be useful information. Also, while exploring Vermilion, I thought it was kind of neat how you can find an old man making a building with his Pokemon. It's just a nice idea that helps make the world feel more alive. Getting back on topic, we enter the gym and speak to the guy who gives us info. Apparently people refer to Lieutenant Surge as the Lightning American, which means America exists in this game. I have literally no idea how, since Univers is meant to be America. Well, actually NYC, but still America. Is America a region? Is Univers a region inside a region? I don't know, man, this is confusing. Anyways, this gym is the first time where there's an actual puzzle as well as gym trainers, whereas before it was just gym trainers. The goal of this puzzle is to find 2 switches hidden in trash cans. The switches are hidden randomly, so there's no point in looking at where to find them. If you find the first switch and then mess up, you have to restart and the switch is randomized again. After a good 5 minutes or so of searching and fighting all the trainers, I eventually found both and was able to fight Surge. Though apparently there's a glitch where the top left can 10 out of 10 times contain the second button, and all I have to say is, God, I wish I knew this beforehand. According to Surge, electric Pokemon saved him during the war? The fucking war? Is he talking about the Great War? Like, Surge is at least 34, does that mean the war ended very recently? And if so, how is no one talking about it? Is Generation 1 post-apocalypse or something? Okay, we're getting off topic, my bad. The Surge fight wasn't so bad, because there's a 99% chance you're going to get the TM for Dig. You can just catch a Pokemon that can learn it and then just spam it in the Surge fight. I still really want to know what the fuck is up with Surge's lore though. Before I move on to Erika, however, let's take a little intermission to talk about version differences, since I realized I haven't really discussed that so far. Pokemon Red and Blue really didn't have much when it came to version differences, surprisingly. The 2 main things are in the opening animation, which we already discussed at the start of the video, and the Pokemon. There are 11 Pokemon for each game that cannot be caught in the other version, which massively encourages trading due to the fact that the game's big marketing push was gotta catch 'em all. In Pokemon Red, you cannot catch Sandshrew, Sandslash, Vulpix, Ninetales, Meowth, Persian, Bellsprout, Weeping Bell, Victreebel, Magmar, and Pinsir. In Pokemon Blue, you can't catch Ekans, Arbok, Oddish, Gloom, Vileplume, Mankey, Primeape, Growlithe, Arcanine, Scyther, and Electabuzz. But what about Pokemon Yellow? Well, you can't catch Weedle, Kakuna, Beedrill, Ekans, Arbok, Meowth, Persian, Coffin, Weezing, Electabuzz, Magmar, and Raichu, due to your Pikachu not being able to evolve. But that's not where it ends for version differences when it comes to comparing Pokemon Red and Blue to Yellow. First of all, you do not get to choose your starter, you are forced to pick Pikachu, but you can get the regular starters through trainers spread across Kanto. This isn't really a good thing, but considering this was a special edition, I think it's fine, especially since this is meant to resemble the anime. Your rival also gets an Eevee instead of Squirtle, Charmander, or Bulbasaur. The Eevee will evolve depending on the rival battles you win. If you win the battle at Lab and at Route 22, Eevee will evolve into Jolteon. If you win one of the battles but lose the other, Eevee will become a Flareon, and if you lose both, Eevee will become a Vaporeon. Other important changes include gym leader teams becoming more anime accurate and Jessing and James having a cameo, replacing what would usually be Rocket Grunts in Pokemon Red and Blue. The team consists of Ekans, Coffin, and Meowth, all of which, funnily enough, can't be caught in Pokemon Yellow. That's pretty much it for version differences though, let's get back to the rest of the game. However, before we continue forward to Erika, there is one thing I want to point out, and that's how open the game gets here. Once you at least do the SSN stuff, the game weirdly opens up. You could realistically skip Surge entirely and go straight to Lavender. Hell, in my Let's Go playthrough, I completely skipped over Erika and went straight to Saffron without even realizing it. Unintentional or not, it's kinda nice because for the most part this game is pretty linear. So, a bit of warning, everything from here is going to follow what I personally did first, and I'm not bothered if this isn't the canon order. But moving on, after I finished the fight with Surge, I carried on forward, and went through what was unfortunately another cave. However, I caught a level 29 Dug Trio, which I named Dug, so that was pretty cool, and it also meant I finally had a full team of 6 now. Luckily, Diglett Cave was pretty short, and meant I could move on to the next town pretty easily. When I escaped Diglett Cave, I continued down the route to the next town, and came across a Pokeball, which, if you've ever played Pokemon, which you probably should have if you're watching this, you'll know contains an item. I went to pick it up and it told me I had no more space for items. I get this was to make the game harder and to make it so the player had to choose what to take with them and what to leave behind in a PC, but you have no idea how annoying it is that to be able to get the item I have to go all the way back through Diglett Cave to the Poke Center in Vermilion and empty out my bag. Then go back through Diglett Cave again so I can grab an item. And considering you only have 20 slots and there's no extra pockets like there is in future games, and you also can't run, and you basically need to carry with you potions, Pokeballs, any key items, etc., this makes this entire mechanic so fucking frustrating. I think I would be totally fine if they brought this mechanic back, but they would really need to increase the amount of slots. At least make a max of 50 and then have it so you could buy better bags throughout the game. They kinda did this in Legends Arceus, except that was a complete troll because, well, you had to pay way too much for a single slot. There's also a place you have to get inside of to get the item I was trying to get. And in general, to progress. There's a guy who is Professor Oak's aide, and if you've caught 10 kinds of Pokemon, he gives you the HM Flash, which you basically need to get through Rock Tunnel. I do really wish they told you this though, because if you miss this guy, while you can definitely make it through Rock Tunnel, you're going to spend so much longer than you would if you had Flash. You know what else isn't made clear? The fact you have to go all the way back to Cerulean Gym in order to progress any further in the game. Deadass, how is some dumbass kid expected to know this? No, don't get me wrong, I think it's good that the game doesn't hold your hand the entire way through, but there's some things that they need to give at least a clue of how to do. There is no way a kid is going to know they need to go speak to Professor's aide to get Flash or to go back to Cerulean, especially a kid playing this for the first time in the 90s where they didn't exactly have the privilege of just looking things up on Google or asking their followers on Twitter, or hell, even today with kids who might have that game on the 3DS or even 2DS but don't have internet access. Point is, well, I think it's fine they don't hold your hand, they really should give hints on how to progress. Skipping ahead a bit, at the time of writing this, I think I'm almost done with Rock Tunnel, and I think now is a good time to bring up something kinda funny, but also very useful that I noticed. So, sometimes you can just skip past certain trainers entirely by simply going to the furthest side of the screen and walking past them, even if they should actually spot you. I assume this has something to do with the detection radius, but it's still really useful. This obviously doesn't work with every trainer, but it works with quite a few, especially in Rock Tunnel, which, along with repels, made getting through it much quicker. One example of this trick I can name is the female junior trainer outside of Rock Tunnel. Once you exit it, if you go to the bottom of the screen, she won't detect you, even despite you being in front of her and her being on screen. I made it to the next town, and funny enough, this town is the only other town to not have a gym in it. The other town being Pallet Town, the town we start the game in. Hey, wait, what's this town called anyways? Oh. So now that we've made it to the town with the most infamous song in the entire game, or really just in the history of Pokemon, it's time for another intermission in order to talk about the soundtrack. Obviously I won't go through every single song, but I will go through the most iconic ones or the ones that I liked. A lot of these, if not all, will be pretty quick because I'm not a music guy. The OST consists of 45 tracks, so let's begin going through some of them. Obviously I gotta start with probably the most iconic one in the entire series. The opening to Red, Blue and Yellow is pure bliss. It's a great start to the franchise. It's not only included here, but the anime as well. It's what I think everyone should probably hear whenever they think about Pokemon. Next, I think Oak's lab theme is also pretty good. You don't hear it for too long because you're only there for a couple minutes before setting off, but it's still a pretty good track. I do recommend giving it a listen. I also think the rival battle music is really good too, surprisingly good for something so short and produced on the Game Boy. Route 1 is nice to listen to as well, not over the top, just simple and nice to listen to really. The battle and victory music against the wild Pokemon are also again iconic as fuck and actually feel like battle music. Pretty good songs overall. Mount Moon is not only nice to listen to, but gives off the vibe of a cave really well, making you feel worried and unprepared as to what to expect. Route 4 is another good track, but also makes you feel more heroic and ready to face the next gym after making it through Mount Moon. I also love how the music that plays when fighting a gym leader is a much longer remixed version of the music that plays when you're fighting a trainer. It shows you that the gym leaders aren't just your average trainers, and that they are meant to provide much more of a threat. As a result, the victory music is also longer and a remixed version of the victory music when winning against a normal trainer, giving gym leader wins this higher status. And of course we have to talk about Lavender Town. This music is creepy as fuck, and I think that creepypasta that everyone knows has officially taken this song for eternity. It definitely fits the whole vibe of Lavender Town though. Same thing with the Pokemon Tower music in Lavender, just in general kinda scary. Moving on, I love the music for when Team Rocket appears. It's so fucking hysterically silly, because it doesn't really feel threatening at all, but it's also kinda pretty fitting of Team Rocket. However, despite this, the Team Rocket hideout music goes so hard. I genuinely love it. The music for when a Pokemon evolves is once again iconic and is actually pretty good. It fits the animation that plays and it leaves you anticipating what your superpowered animal is going to turn into. The next pieces of soundtrack I want to talk about are very late into the game, and I want to keep this consistent, so instead of skipping ahead, I'm going to split this intermission into two parts. The second part will have my thoughts on the final songs, and my thoughts on the OST as a whole. Anyways, back to where we were. We head into Pokemon Tower for a rival fight. It's theorized that Blue's Raticate died and that's why he was there, especially since he no longer has his Raticate anymore. I also think it's interesting how he says, "What are you doing here? Your Pokemon doesn't look dead. I can at least make them faint." But none of this is ever confirmed, and I'd rather just believe he put it in a box. We head down to Celadon and do what everyone wants to do in a Pokemon game, gamble. And we speak to a Team Rocket grunt inside of the casino who reveals the Team Rocket hideout. The hideout is pretty simple. You just keep going down until you can get the lift key and then go back to the lift and go to fight Giovanni. Giovanni's fight was kinda easy. I took out his first two Pokemon easily with Ivysaur and then sent in Dugtrio to finish with his Kangaskhan. He doesn't really say much either. When you speak to him before the fight starts, he's just like, "Oh shit, you're here," and then after the fight he just gives you the Self Scope and the usual supervillain "I'll be back" type dialogue. It's super disappointing, but it's fine, I guess. While exploring Celadon, I went to see if the Celadon Mall had a bike store because I missed the opportunity to get a bike when I went back to Cerulean and didn't want to go through Rock Tunnel again. Unfortunately, it didn't, but I did find out that the 5th floor of the mall is titled Drugstore, which was kind of funny for me. The drugstore obviously didn't actually have drugs, it's just a title for the store where you can buy things that help increase your Pokemon's stats in battle. But it's still insane that they got away with calling it that. And before anyone goes, "Oh well, drugstore usually means medicine," I would like to bring up that in the Generation 4 games Heart Gold and Soul Silver, Kanto returned and the name drugstore was changed to Battle Collection. So, as long as it's got a connection to the bad kind of drugs, it's not making it in, which is why I thought it was wild to see it. Anyways, I went to the battle with Erika. Overall, she was kinda alright. Wasn't too easy, but wasn't too hard either. Though, I gotta say, the inside of her gym kinda sucks. Like, genuinely, I get what they were going for, but it just looks so messy. There's trainers all scattered about, and because of the lack of colour, actually trying to find her is kinda confusing. Especially since she's grouped in with 3 trainers right next to her. But I got it done, so who cares? I went back to the Pokemon Tower since I could finally grasp now having the Silph Scope. And I gotta say, the Marowak/Cubone storyline is really lame. We never even see the Cubone. There's just no reason for me to care about this at all. I quite liked how Let's Go games handled it, so to see it really dumbed down with barely anything to its name is massively disappointing. But I guess let's move on and head on to the Team Rocket fights. We beat the 3 Rocket members, who by the way are complete dicks to us while leaving. Fuck you too, I guess. And save Fuji. He tells us of how he came here of his own free will to calm Marowak's spirit or whatever, who has now gone to the afterlife. He then takes us to his home and gives us the Pokeflu. What a nice old man. Also, by the way, I used a bunch of the rare candies I had to get all my Pokemon up to a decent level and evolved Ivysaur into Venusaur, which I wasn't expecting because I thought it evolved at level 36. And oh boy, Venusaur's back sprite is rough. Like, what the fuck am I looking at here? Okay, so I'm absolutely nitpicking here, but I want to bring this up. I wasn't actually going to address differences between the remakes and the original games because I simply want to go generation by generation instead. But in this case, I want to bring up a difference I noticed between the Let's Go games and Red, Blue, and Yellow. I want to do a separate video on the Let's Go games when we get to Gen 7 in like 2025 or whatever, and I'm still doing that. However, I did like the detail that when you beat Giovanni at Celadon and Team Rocket in general at the Pokemon Tower, Team Rocket would just completely disappear. But this doesn't happen in the original games. I liked it in Let's Go due to the fact that it made your victory feel earned. You drove Team Rocket completely out of town. I obviously can't fault these games for something that exists 22 years after they were made, but still, I do wish this was included. It just feels cool to see Team Rocket be completely fucked over by me, some kid with a little plant monster that has a rare candy addiction. I did check out Silphco, and honestly I could not be bothered to go through it, so I looked up a tutorial on how to get done fast. For some fucking reason there's a rival fight here, and I don't know why, but it shows Blue absolutely does not have his priorities straight. Like, my brother in Christ, I am trying to take down an evil corporation. Get off of your hater shit and let me cook, please. That being said, compared to the rest of the rival fights, the Silphco fight was by far the toughest one so far. Dude nearly destroyed my team. I did win on the first try, but this was absolutely the worst one. Ironically, Giovanni was pretty easy. The hardest part was his Nidoqueen, who just spammed Body Slam the entire time. But we saved the President and he gave the Master Ball, which I'm immediately putting in the PC because I know how I am. I will 100% accidentally use it on a random easy to catch wild Pokemon and I'd rather not have to hack in another one. There's actually 2 gyms in Saffron, except one of them isn't official and instead of a badge you get a Pokemon. Next to Sabrina's gym is a dojo in which you can either get Hitmonlee or Hitmonchan. It does look like you have to take on all 4 gym trainers, but really you can just hug the right wall, so the only one you actually have to fight is the 4th one. And then go back around to the left wall so you can get past. And then you just gotta take on the leader, who is pretty easy. I picked Hitmonlee, but it doesn't really matter what you pick since you can just hack in the other Pokemon as long as you are playing on the original Game Boy version. In terms of the actual gym though, it was easier than I thought it was gonna be actually. I just spammed dig on a Pokemon and it was pretty much over within a couple minutes. Her gym challenge was actually kinda cool though. It used the warps from herself. I did just look up how to get to her, but I still thought it was kinda cool. Yeah, nothing really happened in this part. I went back to Sylph, got the Lapras from floor 7, then went west of Celadon and used the Pokeflute on Snorlax, which I caught, but I didn't put on the team. I also found an easy way back to Cerulean and got a bike. I took Cycling Road and got to Fuchsia City easily. Fuchsia City was confusing as fuck to navigate by the way, but I found the gym eventually. Koga's gym was pretty easy, spam dig again as Pokemon, and the gym challenge was pretty unique. Since he's meant to be a ninja, having the player navigate a maze with invisible walls was a really interesting idea. Before I could actually start going to Blaine though, I had to get Surf. This is the most tedious fucking thing in the entire game. I had to go find the Safari Zone, then go through a wild goose chase to find this old dude's teeth, and then I had to find the old guy, then get Surf, and then wait until the Safari Zone timer ran out because I can't just leave when I want to. I got to Seaphone Cave and did not feel like going through that, so I just went back to Cycling Road and went to a place blocked off by Cut so I could grab Fly, use it to go to Pallet, and then get to Blaine that way. I overdosed all my Pokemon, including Lapras, who has now replaced Arbok. Before I could actually challenge Blaine though, I had to go through the Pokemon Mansion, which was basically a lore dump. It mainly tells the story of how a group of scientists studied Mew and eventually created Mewtwo, who was too powerful for them to control. This is never expanded on though, not as near as much compared to the anime at least. I found the key and went to challenge Blaine. Blaine was easy again. Lapras took care of everything. The gym challenge is a Pokemon quiz that tests your knowledge. I think that's a good idea, as by now the player has been going for so long that it's time to see what they've learned. Though I do have to ask, why the fuck is Blaine hiring criminals? What's up with that? Moving on though, before we carry on to the final battle with Giovanni and Viridian, I want to have another intermission to talk about the combat. So, I'm gonna be honest here, the combat in this game, kinda mid. Yeah, it's not bad, but it's also not good. It's very bare bones. You can't look at the power of your moves or see a description of what the moves themselves do. There's also no abilities or held items, and it's all single battles. There's no real strategy to it either, just spam your best move and win. The only strategy involved is type matchups, which are fairly simple to understand. And critical hits are also extremely easy to get. Like, I genuinely believe I've probably gotten a crit in 90% of my battles. The other 10% are ones where I got one-hit KOs due to my opponent being a low level or a good type matchup. If you remember in Brock's section, I made a joke about how the game was at least harder than Sword and Shield. However, while I'm still kinda right, the reason the game is difficult is purely because of the grinding you have to do. But again, the grinding is fucking boring and makes the game an absolute chore to play through. It's probably why it took so long to finish this game until I had the idea to hack in rare candies. If you hypothetically took away the grinding and made the XP game the same as Sword and Shield, this game would be just as easy, if not easier, than that game, because the combat is just so easy and bare bones. And to be fair, you could definitely argue that this probably is a good thing. These were the first games in the series as a whole. It wouldn't exactly be the most understandable thing for the millions of people picking up the game for the first time, especially since the game already tells you barely anything and leaves it all up to you to understand. But at the same time, this is still happening today. I won't disagree that the games have gotten much more handholdy throughout the years, but they definitely don't bother to explain things such as abilities or how to use items like X attacks, even really how to play competitively in general. I'm sure they could have found ways to make the combat more interesting that isn't just start battle, pick strongest attack, mash A on that attack, battle over. But that's pretty much all I have to say on the combat. Let's continue on the road to Giovanni. Before I left Cinnabar though, I got the fossil I took from Mount Moon revived, and I received an Ammonite. I then flew over to Pallet to walk through Route 1, and I visited Professor Oak again. And I find it fucking hilarious how the starter that wasn't picked by you or your rival, in my case, Squirtle, just stays on that desk for the rest of eternity. They need to put some respect on my boy's name. But in that case, why the hell can't I have it? It doesn't seem like anyone else is going to take it. There's been no more trainers that have started their journey since I left, it seems. I 100% should be allowed to take it. But anyways, it doesn't matter. I made my way to Viridian to finally challenge Giovanni. His gym challenge consists of navigating through the arrow tiles from the rocket hideout. Guess he just really likes those for some reason. Also, a lot of his trainers actually have whips, and actually so does another gym leader in this game, that being Sabrina. Funny enough, the reason for this is actually kinda dark. Essentially, one of the ideas that almost made it into Red and Blue was that the player would collect whips instead of badges, and you could whip your Pokemon in order to make it obey. It was planned for the player character, Red, to have one as well, but this was obviously not included. So there's a bit of knowledge for you that was totally not added to make this section longer. Back to the actual fight with Giovanni though. He reveals he planned to resurrect Team Rocket here in Viridian. I kicked his ass very easily. The entire fight was literally me just spamming Surf. Once I beat him, he reveals how he's going to disband Team Rocket and dedicate his life to studying Pokemon. Which is kinda cool and all, and I'm sure he'll 100% stick to that and never come back. But like, he's kind of a lame villain. Like, what the fuck was even his goal? World domination? To control every Pokemon? It's kind of a shame that once we're done with the stuff going on at Lavender, Saffron, and Celadon, Team Rocket dips completely. Hell, Giovanni doesn't feel like a threat at all. Blue, of all characters, felt like more of a threat than him. And I'm aware that I did gyms 5 and 6 in the wrong order. I should have done Sabrina as the 6th gym, but like, think about it. Saffron is right in between Celadon and Lavender, and you get the drink to give the guards at Celadon so you can go to Saffron in the first place. Why would I not go to Sabrina before Koga? But I'm getting off topic. I have some other thoughts on the story as a whole, but I'll save that for the final thoughts. Without further ado, let's head on to Victory Road. The start of the journey to Victory Road begins with a rival battle. Surprisingly, this battle was pretty easy. way easier than compared to the one at Silphco, which is probably up there for the toughest fight I've had in the game so far. Blue is once again on his ego shit and says how we're the ones who need more practice, as if I haven't beaten him in every rival battle so far. I continue forward to get allowed into Victory Road. For some reason you have to verify each badge one by one instead of all of them at once, but okay, that's fine. I entered Victory Road and honestly it was just a puzzle along with some trainer fights and that's it. But I do have a couple issues with this Victory Road. Okay, so first of all, to even be able to do this you require the TM for strength. How do you get this TM? Well, go figure it out, because the game does not at all feel like explaining this. Again, this is an insanely major issue with Gen 1 like I discussed earlier. The game expects you to know this stuff right from the jump, and if you don't, too bad, you're on your own. It's incredibly annoying having to go back to places just so you can get required TMs, and it's even worse if you don't get Fly either. Which, surprise surprise, the game doesn't tell you about either. And that's not the only case of this in Victory Road. Like I said already, Victory Road is a puzzle with trainer fights included too. But the issue with the puzzle aspect is this is almost never used in the rest of the game. At least not in ways that are needed for the player to progress. It is used in the Seafoam Islands, but you can skip that place entirely unless you want the legendaries. So the one place where you can actually learn can just be completely avoided. So what the fuck was the point? And also, why does this area have encounters? Like, I guarantee you not a single person is catching anything here. But I'd be perfectly fine with it if there wasn't an encounter every 3 goddamn seconds. Overall though, Victory Road was alright, I guess. I did look up how to solve it, but that's because I'm trying to get this finished as quickly as possible. I started writing this script back on January 3rd, it is now April 16th, I am tired. At the entrance to Elite Four, there is literally a Pokemart and Pokecenter combined into one. Like, they deadass just copy-pasted the layout and put them into a large room. I assume this is to do with the sprites, but it's still kinda funny. And with that, it's time to take on the first Elite Four member, which is Lorelei. She was alright, I had tons of counters for her since she was primarily water and ice. Next was Bruno. He was unironically easier than Lorelei. While she was able to knock out my Venusaur, he couldn't really knock out any of my Pokemon. His Machamp nearly knocked out my Pidgeot, but he fainted to recoil before he could. Next up is Agatha. She apparently has beef with Professor Oak, and from what I understand, they can't agree on what Pokemon are good for. I don't know, I could be wrong on that. As for the fight itself, Agatha should've been hard. Keyword is should've, because with the combination of Earthquake and Dig, plus her AI just being dumb, she was the easiest one so far. Literally didn't land a single hit on me. And when I say her AI was dumb, I mean it was fucking stupid. Her Golbat was the worst of it. It had a couple chances to attack, and whenever it had those chances, it just spammed Haze, even though there were no status changes. And whenever it did attack, I was in the air because I was using Fly, which resulted in an instant miss. Also, like, why the fuck is she even a Ghost Trainer? All of her Pokemon are poison. There are some Ghost types, but not all of them. Finally, in the Elite Four was Lance. By far the hardest one. His Hyper Beam was extremely powerful, and all of his Pokemon, with the exception of Aerodactyl, caused trouble for my team. However, after a tough battle, I beat him and I was officially the Pokemon champion. Or not. Yeah, so it turns out Blue had beaten it before us, meaning it all came down to one final battle with Blue for me to actually become the champion. Which, by the way, how the fuck did he get here? I beat him in Route 22 and then kept on going. He had to go all the way to the Poké Center, so there was no way he could have done any of this before me. But despite this, I do think Blue being your first ever and last fight on the road to becoming champion is really cool. As Blue has always been one step ahead, teasing and making fun of you, getting to show him what you're actually made of by, well, you know, beating him is just a cool thing to end off on. Especially since they never do this again in future generations. Which is fine, but I wouldn't mind them doing this again one day. But after an incredibly intense battle with Blue, with me having to actually think to overcome his Pokemon and resist the urge not to send out Venusaur against Charizard and potentially throw just because I thought it'd be poetic, I officially became the Pokemon League champion. Blue is left in utter shock and Oak makes a surprise return to congratulate me. He takes us into the Hall of Fame where the credits roll and we see the league winning team, which was PVZ/Venusaur, our starter Pokemon that was with us through thick and thin. Nodorat, the Rattata, now Eradicate, I caught all the way back at the beginning. Burb, the Pidgey, now Pidgeot, that I also caught at the beginning. Dugdug, the Dugtrio we caught in Diglett's Cave. Thunder, the Pikachu I modded into the game and has been with me ever since. And finally, Lapras, who wasn't initially meant to be on the team but was a huge help. I will also shout out Whirple, the Ekans, now Arbok, I caught in Cerulean, who got replaced by Lapras but was a massive carry throughout a good chunk of the game. After the Hall of Fame, we get sent back to the title screen, and when we started back up, are sent to Palette. I went to speak to the character who started us off, was there and supported us when we left home, and decided to travel all across the region. My mum, who isn't in the game at all other than the start, and she had nothing to say. She just healed my Pokemon and told me to fuck off. Thanks, Mum. I did complete the Pokédex, and honestly, it's not worth it. All you get is a certificate from speaking to a Gamefreak employee. If you really want to, you can, but if you're doing it just to see what you get, literally just get a cheat to auto-complete the Pokédex. It's not worth it. I do want to shout out this guy, though, who wrote the story. You sucked. They need to hire someone better. Also, someone may want to arrest him. He seems to have a concerning obsession with teenage girls. Before we move on to the final thoughts, so I have one last intermission to do. So, like I said way earlier in the video, I wanted to come back to the final pieces of soundtrack later so that we could keep it consistent. So, now that we've beaten the game, it's time to talk about these. I really love the Victory Road music, because I think it's genuinely cool how it's a remix of the opening theme, the first thing you hear whenever you start up the game. It's symbolic of how far you've come since picking your starter, and it's now time for that journey to come to an end by fighting and beating the Elite Four as well as the champion. I also think the final battle music is incredible too, being incredibly tense. This is not only the most important fight in the game, but it's incredibly personal as well. The final song is called Into the Palace, and I love it so much. It's just a nice song and makes you feel that final sense of relief after months of tirelessly grinding the game to be the very best like no one ever was. Overall, this soundtrack is full of life and it's a really incredible OST. It gives some super iconic tracks and it's really cool how good everything sounds despite being on the Game Boy. Without further ado though, let's move on to the final thoughts of the game and wrap up the video. Okay, so, as a generation, how good is Pokemon Generation 1? Well, I mean, it's alright. The beginning of the game is definitely very rough. If I was playing this normally and not for this retrospect, I would have definitely dropped this very quickly. It's simply a game with pretty little replay value, and just not a good game in general. As a start to the franchise, it's fine, but if this was released nowadays, just with good graphics, I do not think it would have been received very well. For starters, the story is just meh. Like, it's barely even there. A lot of things just happen and then never get addressed again. Like the whole Marowak and Cubone thing. It just happens, but it's not explained at all. It has little build-up and it's just in general pointless. It only exists as a way to make the game longer. Realistically, you can take the storyline out and it affects nothing. And oh boy, Team Rocket. They're a funny team, but they aren't a threat at all. Giovanni especially is just a guy who is powerful. That's it. He has no clear motive or whatever. He just is there as an obstacle for the player, and while I think it's cool that Giovanni is the last gym leader, as it inevitably sends you back to where you began, and it's set up at the beginning of the game, it doesn't feel cool. Like, Giovanni at the end just feels like another gym leader. He leaves no impact. I don't feel like I just took down an entire organization. I feel like I took down some guy who happened to have a power trip. What's ironic about this entire thing is he's the only character in the entire game to actually have some kind of arc, even if it's very small. And when I say that, I'm looking at you, Blue. Blue just doesn't change at all. He's just this constant annoyance. And I'm very aware that I said at the start of the video that I liked how he's a dick, and that I'm technically being a hypocrite here. But I also like characters who grow and change. Hell, maybe even have Blue help Red to defeat Team Rocket, learning to put aside their differences. But no, at the end of the journey, Blue is just some kid who is just a massive, egotistical bitch who doesn't learn from anything he does and doesn't grow from that. And while we're still on the topic of characters, another issue I have is how, other than Blue, Oak, and Giovanni, every character you meet does not come back. Even Oak doesn't really count because its only appearances are at the very start and very end of the game. So the only consistent characters are Giovanni and Blue. I don't have personal connections to any of the gym leaders or Elite Four in this game because they don't really do shit. They just exist for the purpose of being an obstacle for the player to get past. And the Elite Four is definitely much worse when it comes to this. Not only do they have zero build up, but also like, why aren't they doing shit? They're meant to be the strongest trainers in Kanto or whatever, but can't help to take down the evil organization that's trying to take over the region. Thank God from the anime that gives at least some of these characters life. Moving on from characters and story though, the gameplay is also just kinda eh. I've already addressed this a few times, so I won't go too much into it here, but again, like I've said a couple times, grinding in this game is a fucking chore to do, and the combat is pretty damn basic. If you want to make the game good, you need to make the grinding worth it, since that's what you're doing for a good 80% of this game. And I do have to bring up that this game was massively buggy on release. I didn't experience anything in my playthrough of the game other than, I guess, the thing with trainers not detecting me, but I'm not sure if that's intentional. But the fact is, they were pretty buggy, and due to updates not existing back then, the only way to patch this was to release a whole new version of the game, where you'd have to pay another 60 bucks. Another thing I've talked about a lot in this video is also how the game expects you to do everything by yourself. Which should be a good thing that the game isn't handholdy, but when the game hides so much info from you that it's to the point where it can completely block you from progressing, it isn't at all. There needs to be a middle ground, and this is at the very bottom floor. I also think the towns of this game were some of the most wasted potential of all. None of them really feel like the environment of their gym leaders. PUC has caves to the side of it, but that's as far as it goes. Cerulean has water surrounding it, but again, as far as the water resemblance goes. And then it just gets worse and worse. Sabrina, Erika, Surge, etc. All of them just have nothing relating to their types, are all in their own towns. Blaine's closest resemblance is the island being called Cinnabar, which is associated with volcanoes, but that's it. I get that making every town have their own style and feeling unique to each other isn't the easiest thing to do, especially with what they were developing for and the resources they had, but I just wish every town didn't feel so bland and samey. The routes also needed more to do. Every route was just a clear one-way path with not much to them in my opinion. That sense of exploration was desperately needed here, and it's unfortunately lacking. However, this game does have some positives. I love the idea behind all the Pokemon sprites. It's clear they weren't going for something cute here, at least with most of them, but something unnatural. These aren't pets, but incredibly powerful creatures that, while they can be tamed, aren't normal. Their sprites really embrace how weird and freaky they are, which is something I think the games after this really missed the mark on. And obviously I just spoke about the soundtrack, but it is genuinely a banger. A perfect start to a not so perfect franchise. So many iconic tracks that would go on to be remembered for years to come. I also think, even though it can be annoying at times, the caves were good to hit too. I like how it genuinely felt interesting to explore. I definitely think the encounter rate needed to be turned down though, which is honestly probably my biggest issue with the caves. But other than that, they were a good challenge, and I'm very happy they were well done here. And I know I just complained about the towns and routes, but I do think the region design as a whole was pretty cool. I love how it all loops back around. Yes, it definitely makes it feel more linear because of that, but that's more to blame on the story if anything. In conclusion, Pokemon Red, Blue, Yellow, and Green 2 are definitely decent starts to the franchise, but as games, and especially Pokemon games, they are extremely flawed, and I do not think they belong anywhere near the discussion of what's the best Pokemon game. They lack numerous things that make Pokemon, well, Pokemon. The story is held together by glue and blue tack, and the overall gameplay loop is extremely tiring. With that said though, I'm going to end this here. I really hope you guys liked this video, and subscribe for future content if you haven't already. This video took months to make, so any kind of support or suggestions would massively help me. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.